I want to thank you all for being here. I'm going to get your minds right with this masterclass as best as I can. We founded AV in 2016 in Melbourne, Australia. Asal was also part of this journey with me. So she co-founded this organization with me. We specialize in street outreach. So we only do the Cube of Truth. That's literally all AV does, cubes of truth. We don't do anything else because we feel that we need to master our craft. You know, that's extremely important in our view, to not have so many different things that you're doing and then you're not really, jack of all trades, master of none. You've heard that. We took that very seriously. We also started with a top-down hierarchical structure with the organization. And I just want to explain something. My goal was to get out onto the streets and do effective street work, right? I didn't set out to start an organization. My goal was not to direct an organization at all. The only reason I found myself doing that was because I recognized that leadership was needed in this movement, and the organization made sense because the street model that we had put together in Melbourne, once it was curated, we needed to get that out to the rest of the world. And in order to do that, you need an organization behind it. That's the only way to do that professionally. So once we started the organization, we decided on a top-down hierarchical structure. We're very clear about that. When organizers join AV, we've always been clear about this from the very beginning. This is the organization that you're joining. We do not have a committee board. We do not vote for executive decisions. We take feedback. We will consider your views, and we will make the executive decision at the end of the day. You have to trust our leadership, otherwise things will be chaotic. We have seen this time and time again with decision making. Either things do not get done or the decisions that are made get watered down over time, and then the mission is lost. We take an abolitionist stance on all forms of animal exploitation at the hands of humans without any exceptions. The AV culture is something I'm extremely proud of. This is one of the reasons why we are so successful, is that we have a constructive feedback culture. We are open to giving and receiving feedback, and I would invite all of you to do the same thing, to be open to being given feedback, because nobody here should be above feedback, and also being open to receiving feedback, right? So giving and receiving feedback is a 360-degree feedback culture here at AV. Otherwise, we can't see ourselves growing and developing and evolving without that. And we ask that you give feedback through the appropriate chains of communication. Use tact, be respectful. If you have feedback to give to somebody, especially if it's critical in nature, like it's not necessarily positive feedback in the sense you're not singing their praises necessarily, it's something that they need to improve on, give it to them privately. Don't do it in front of a bunch of people. There's no need to call people out. So that's how we do it. We have a call-in culture. Like I said, we don't like to call people out. Calling in means that if you see something that's happening online or in the streets or among other people, pull them aside privately, give them the feedback. We're here on the same team, right? Let's act like it. I think we need to actually respect each other that much, that we're here as a team. Another thing is that when we show up to a cube, you're not there as an individual anymore. You're there as a team. And we need to think that way, because if you think of us as a sport team and our goal is to win a championship, you can't have individuals doing their own thing. We all have to stick to the game plan. Otherwise, it does jeopardize our mission. We are married to constant and consistent development. We are loyal to tried and true principles over dogmatism and ego. And we take the task of being most effective most seriously. Some people ask why we use the AV mask. Why do we use the Guy Fawkes mask? Well, so what Guy Fawkes represents has evolved over centuries. Once he was the hated villain of the 1605 gunpowder plot, but in the 21st century, Fawkes masks became a symbol of resistance. So, this mask, as we saw it, because we had to pick a mask initially, right? We had to pick a white mask. That was something we set out to do. But then when I saw this mask, I thought to myself, why the hell wouldn't we use this when the anonymous movement, as it stands in the 21st century, is supposed to represent stamping out oppression? And it's counterculture, it's working against the corruption of society, and it doesn't have a strong enough voice for the animals. In the anonymous movement, you barely have any operations that you see that are dedicated to ending the injustice that animals are subjected to at the hands of humans. So we set out to make sure that that mask properly represents stamping out oppression. And I think we've done a good job at that. So in this country, in 1949, Leslie Cross pointed out that the society lacked a definition of veganism, and he suggested the principle of emancipation of animals from exploitation by man, later clarified as to seek an end to the use of animals by man for food, commodities, work, hunting, vivisection, and by all other uses involving exploitation of animal life by man. And then I believe it was 1951 when it was formalized. So the doctrine that man should live without exploiting animals, that language is now outdated. So we have formalized it and modernized it to now be the ethical principle that humans should live without exploiting other animals. And we say other animals because part of this is understanding that we are animals. We tend to forget that, but we're one of millions of species on this planet. And we think we're so important and so special. I say we, but I mean non-vegans because you guys get this now, right? That somehow that justifies subjugating every other species of animal. So being vegan means you are rejecting the exploitation of other animals. Veganism has nothing to do with human health. Human health is another way of saying human rights. So if you find yourself in outreach interactions talking about how much better it is to eat lentils than it is to eat steak, you are now having a human rights discussion. Do you realize that? When you are having a human rights discussion, you are no longer having a veganism discussion. Those two things are separate. In fact, it's distasteful because humans are the oppressors of the animals that you're there to represent. Just be mindful of that. If someone has a genuine concern for their health, we'll cover that in this, but you can obviously address it. But if you find yourself saying it's much healthier to be vegan, you're now promoting human rights, not veganism. And this is also not about the environment. Environmentalism is a separate cause. Environmentalism is something that comes up when I say these things. Some people like to say to me, yes, but the animals live in the environment. That's true. But guess who also lives in the environment? Humans. And we have dominated the entire planet. So if you think that by talking about environmentalism to non-vegans if you think that that's going to convince people to be vegan, and it may convince them to be plant-based, what you're now doing is you're promoting an idea to them that only benefits humans in their minds usually. They don't really care about gorillas and zebras and giraffes. That's not what they're thinking about when you talk about environmentalism. They are thinking about how much this affects humans, probably just themselves and their families. This is only perpetuating human supremacism even further. Environmentalism is an important talking point, but keep it separate to veganism. This is also not about affection. This is also not about love or positivity. It doesn't matter how much people find this to be a loving movement. I love all you guys. But veganism has nothing to do with love in and of itself. The stance of being against animal exploitation has nothing to do with how much I love other animals. In fact, there's many animals I don't even want to be around. And this also has nothing to do with positivity. A basic stance on justice is not necessarily about positivity. It's about fairness, right? And this is also not about a reduction of suffering. That's an important distinction to make because that leads you down a very slippery slope. And we can discuss that further later if you like. It is only about justice for animals who are oppressed at the hands of humans. And this is about ending human supremacy, which is the operating system behind all of the actions of non-vegans. So what is vegan outreach? It's speaking up for the victims in the same way that you would want to be spoken up for if you were in the victim's position. Being a medium of truth and enacting change by prioritizing victims and not the oppressors. If you aren't speaking up for the animals in the same way that you would want to be spoken up for, you aren't doing justice for the animals. The core of a successful outreach interaction is centered around holding individuals accountable for what they're personally responsible for, and everything else is details. Like I said, veganism is about justice. It's not about love or compassion. Your likability does not determine your rights. So outreach is not about how you or anyone else feels about other animals. If you don't go around beating children, you aren't instantly a compassionate individual. If you walk down the street and you see a puppy and you don't kick them, that doesn't make you compassionate, right? That's not how we measure compassion in society, is it? Did you go out today and kill anybody? No, wow. You're a great person. So even if somebody hates you, they have no right to strip you of your rights, to steal your freedoms, your liberties, to make you their object, their property. Okay? Even if they hate you. That's how this works. It's not about being loving. It's the right thing to do. It's simply sane and just. And the last point there is that this approach, summarized into one small sentence, the outreach approach that we have is pure honesty. The reason why we have the word truth, and that's the only word that we use, is that that's the most powerful weapon that we have on our side. And that's what this is all about at the end of the day. If we didn't have the truth on our side, it wouldn't make any sense for us to be standing out there on the streets talking to people about this. We wouldn't be getting through to so many people otherwise. Raise your hand if you've heard the term planting seeds. All of you. So what we mean by planting seeds is that the bystander or the non-vegan that you're speaking with leaves that conversation knowing that they are personally responsible for what we're showing on the screens or for what is happening to animals as a result of them and their choices, and that they must be vegan as of that day, and anything less is morally unjustifiable. Most people think that planting seeds is about verbally leafleting, just giving people information. Verbally leafleting is basically just giving people points and questions that lack individual accountability. And if you find yourself doing that, remember that what you're doing is actually, in some sense, making this more complicated in their heads, and you're just giving them more food for thought. And food for thought causes inactivity. It causes more complicity and complacency. So, like I said, the word truth is extremely important to us. So for us, it's truth over everything. When it comes to injustice, when there are undeserving victims involved, morality is black and white. That's why our logo and all of our branding is black and white. And it's also simple. You said this the other day, right? That stuck with me when you said that, Rebecca, at the Vegan Camper. You said, when I look at your branding, I think simple. And I said, well, yeah, the truth is simple, isn't it? Especially when it comes to this. And a lot of people argue, no, it's not as simple as that. It's complicated. There's a gray area that you're missing. Well, what if you were the victim? So telling victimizers the truth and holding them accountable on behalf of their victims is the most loving and respectful thing that you can do for them, even if they can't seem to handle it. Morality is black and white. And especially when it comes to a situation when there are undeserving victims involved, it's just that simple. Anyone who attempts to convince you otherwise is gaslighting you. Know that. When you are being disingenuous, non-vegans see that your desire to be validated is stronger than your desire to defend animals, thereby making a mockery of the victims. So for those of you who have perhaps unconsciously done this, focusing on being liked by the other person as a primary, this actually causes the other person to lose respect for you. You may not realize that because they may be nodding their heads, looking at you going, that's a really good point. Thank you for giving me something to think about. I respect the work you do. In the back of their minds, they're thinking, I've lost respect for this person because they're not willing to say what needs to be said. You're not prioritizing the victims, which you're supposed to be standing out there representing anyway. It's back to front. If you actually want to earn respect from people, tell them what they need to hear. Actually say what you mean. Don't water it down into a version that you think works well because it lands better, because it sounds nicer, because it's sweeter, and because more people will agree with that. Obviously, there's a way to say things which we need to master, but what I'm saying is if you end up compromising on the truth in what you're saying, that will lose respect from the person you're talking to, I guarantee you. And this was a quote from Don Freeman. One of the nicest things that you can do for people is be brutally honest. Most of them won't be able to handle it because they're so used to sugar-coated bullshit, their subconscious will absorb it. And as long as your intent is righteous, that is an important thing to say at the end there. As long as your intent is righteous, right? You're not just out there trying to own people. You're not just trying to win debates. You're not getting any personal gratification out of this. This is not about you. This is about the victims and liberating them. As long as that's clear in the way you speak, in the way you present the information, in the way that you tell the truth, I'm sure that people in their, at least in their subconscious, I'm sure of this through all of my experience, people will resonate with that. They will actually, maybe not in the moment, but in due time, will see that as one of the nicest things that anyone's ever done for them. And why don't people seem to care about animals? Because, you know, a lot of people say, well, we should actually use the environment and the health points because we can hook people in with as many different hook points as possible. We tried that already. We did it for years all around the world. The reason why we have pivoted and course corrected is because we realize that we need to be responsible here. How are we speaking about the victims exactly? Are we actually implying that the animals are not enough of a reason? That you need other reasons? So for the individuals, that's incredibly disrespectful, wouldn't you agree? We need to speak up for animals correctly. That's what we can be responsible about. Too many vegans focus on things like plant-based recipes, restaurants, weight loss, or deforestation. If the way that you communicate on behalf of the animals seems to lack a serious focus on them as individuals, and instead focuses on human benefits, it implies that we don't need to care and that they aren't deserving of liberation. This is not a conversation about sympathy. This is a conversation about personal accountability. In terms of reachability and conversation length, not everybody on the streets is worth talking to. You will not convince 100% of the people that you talk to live vegan. Humans are scumbags. The good news, however, is that many people will change. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here as an organization today having the success that we're having. So the good news is that not everybody out there is a scumbag. Part of your role is to assess who is reachable and who is not. So part of your job, you should be keeping this in mind, you know, while you're out there as an activist. Part of your role is this person worth my time? Are they going to be reachable or not? Everybody needs to be given the truth, but how much time you spend with that person is completely within your control, and you should be taking that as part of your role extremely seriously. Do not underestimate the cunningness of non-vegans, which is fueled by their guilt, and the ability that many non-vegans have to waste your vital time at work for the animals. They may not even realize they're doing it, but they're attacking you because you're the messenger. That's easier to do, isn't it? Oh, you're making me feel guilty, playing the victim, when in this situation, in this conversation, the only victims are the animals. They're victims, right? So it's easier to play the victim than it is to be accountable. And so they will usually do mental gymnastics to make you out to be the bad person in this conversation. Be mindful of that when it's happening. If they want to have a short conversation with you, keep it short with them. Don't entertain people who want to engage in long argumentative debates. If people say they want to debate you or they show you that they want to debate you, we're not here for that. Justice is not up for debate. Pure and simple. Socratic questioning is not an approach in and of itself. Some people get that confused. We're not just out there only asking questions. It is a communication tool that we use within our approach where we ask to lead the bystander to their own conclusions. These are some examples. Hello, how do you feel about humans exploiting other animals? Do you agree that we should be respecting other animals? Can you truly respect animals if you still consume their flesh, milk, and eggs? Step number 4, do you know the definition of veganism? So we focus way more on why than how. So recently I did a talk at the VCO, and at the beginning of the talk, I told about 3 people this. I plan to invite someone who wasn't vegan from the audience to come to the stage and get outreached by me. And the reason I did that was obvious. It was so that I could showcase to everybody how to do an outreach interaction. And also I wanted to convert someone in front of everybody to give people hope on this outreach approach. However, the person did not go vegan, did not give a declaration. Well, we don't know if they went vegan yet. They didn't give a declaration, but some people may have been thinking I should have focused a little bit more on how, because they were talking about nutritional concerns. And I empowered them by saying you can figure this out by using ChatGPT. And there was one comment I saw on my Facebook saying, you should have spent more time actually showing her how to navigate her nutritional issues. But from all of my experience in doing this, there are two kinds of people who say nutrition though. There's genuine people and then there's disingenuous people, right? In that interaction, I had already assessed that her concern was not genuine. She was just making an excuse. I was also giving her the tools to figure out how to navigate that. So I didn't leave her empty-handed, but at the same time, I also called her out on being disingenuous about this nutritional qualm. And it's quite frankly disrespectful to the victims to say, nutrition though, when you're amongst thousands of vegans who are all figuring it out. Just ask questions. You know, navigate this. If you have a will, you will have a way. In our view, people already know how to be vegan. You just eat plants, you stop buying things that come off the backs of animals, you know? You stop exploiting animals. Is that so hard to understand? Really? We're acting like it's this big challenge that we need to hold people's hand through. It's not. It's extremely simple. With the availability of Google and ChatGPT and all these AIs, anybody can figure out how to live vegan instantly. So we feel that we do not need to focus so much on how. And if you do see me or any of the experienced AV outreachers focusing on how, it will only usually be about 5% of the entire outreach interaction. And usually you won't see us focusing on it at all. So the reason why we do this is because in order for people to feel the need to become vegan, they need to be held accountable for why they should do it. Focusing on how is actually in some way an insult to the victims and marginalizes the severity of their oppression. When you talk about how easy it is to be vegan, imagine if you were the victim. Oh, it's so easy to stop victimizing them. But why? This is what's holding them back. It's not how. By the way, for those who say it's hard, I like to remind them that we have chapters in this organization in places like the Congo, where it's incredibly impoverished. And they're not only vegan, but they're speaking up for the animals. They're vegan activists. And you'll see them doing their cubes, and behind them, you'll be lucky to even find a shack, let alone a building, right? So that's how they're living. And so is there really any excuse here? At the Cube in Cologne, there was an activist who showed up with a broken leg to do activism with us. Like, the more and more I see these examples from people, I'm like, what is your excuse? David Rams got on stage at VCO and showed his friend. His friend is unable to do anything and still makes posts on social media using AI and still demands vegan food. It's beyond absurd that people make excuses for not being vegan especially, and also for not speaking up for the animals, but we'll get into that. So raise your hand if you've heard this. Oh, I'm vegetarian. You don't need to talk to me. Why do vegetarians think that they are our allies? Why do they think they are animal people? Part of the reason is because so many vegans have actually made vegetarians the allies of vegans. So many vegans have actually comforted vegetarians to stay doing exactly what they're doing. Vegetarians are our target market. When they say, oh, you don't need to talk to me, I'm vegetarian, I'm on your side. Oh, really? You're actually our target market. You're the kind of person I need to talk to. Vegetarians are non-vegans, plain and simple. And they should be outreached like anyone else, and in most cases with even more vigor, because they think they're already doing enough. So you should actually be putting it into third gear from the beginning. They're no different to people who eat a paleo diet. The paleo diet is basically a diet predicated on eating like the Paleolithic original human, you could say, while we were living in caves and living to age 35. I'm not sure why that is the cornerstone of anyone's diet, but yeah, that's a craze, and it's, you know, it's changed forms into like the carnivore or the ancestral. But I mean, the paleo diet is a specific diet that does not include any dairy products. So they are not supposed to eat any milk, cheese, anything that comes from cow breast milk. So most vegetarians are responsible for just as much animal exploitation. Why should we outreach these people any different. So the point we're trying to make here is that if you wouldn't go easier on someone who's doing a paleo diet, then why would you go easy on a vegetarian? They're both excluding one form of exploitation from their diets. And it is a diet. Vegetarianism is a diet. No different to a paleo diet, right? They eat animal flesh, but they don't eat anything from cow breast milk. And many vegans actually argue that the dairy industry is the most cruel, the most exploitative, right? So then are we supposed to now say vegans are allies with paleo dietists? Like the paleo crew are right there next to us. We should say vegan/paleo? This is madness. So they're not our allies. Don't let other vegans or non-vegans manipulate you into thinking that they are. Vegetarianism is more of a problem than meat eating. It's created this idea that there's this second version of veganism that exists, whereby you feel like an animal defender without actually having to be one. When there is a bootleg fake version of veganism that exists, we have a problem, because that means that people aren't going to take the actual position of veganism seriously enough. They think they can actually just live in this other gray area of vegetarianism, and that just causes more complacency most of the time, which is why so many vegetarians think they're already doing enough. Granted, there are a lot of vegetarians out there that as soon as you talk to them truthfully about this, they'll change. But a lot of the times, most of the times, we find they are more difficult to get through to. You cannot manipulate people into going vegan with political or sales games. This is something I had to learn from the beginning of doing cubes. You know, in the early stages of doing AV, I thought I could bring my sales experience that I had previous to activism, and I had a big ego in the sense that I thought that I could schmooze people and convince them with clever questions that were basically rooted in convincing people to sign on the dotted line. That's where I learned all of these skills, right? This is about convincing people, but when it comes to a justice issue, this is not the same as sales. This is something completely different. Activism is not the same thing. It's completely different to sales, okay? I've said that now 3 times in one sentence for a reason, because some people really do think that you can schmooze people into being vegan, that you can trick them with sales tactics or political games. An example of a political game is pandering, where you focus on being liked as a primary. There is no magic set of words to use during outreach that will make someone go vegan. If they're ready, they'll listen and change. If they're not ready, they won't. Your function as an activist is to hold the individual that you're speaking with accountable for the animal exploitation that they're responsible for. And always remember, you will not have 100% success. So get the truth across, say everything you need to say in the correct possible way, and you've done the best that you can do. Let the universe take care of the rest. Pandering is when you are over agreeable and disingenuous during outreach interactions for the sake of being listened to or engaged with. Of course, we want to be listened to and engaged with, but when you are prioritizing that, when you are prioritizing getting agreeable signs from the person that you're talking to, like nodding the head and saying things like, yes, that's interesting, right? You know, you've given me something to think about. What you're doing is you're causing non-vegans to lose respect for you as an activist, and you'll lose control of the conversation. That's another important point. You will lose control of the conversation when you do this. And there's always one entity in the conversation, and there's always one entity that is in control. Make sure that that entity is you, because this is not neutral. So if it's you and one other person or multiple people that you're talking to, who's in control of the conversation? If it's not you, it's them. That's how this works. Non-vegans will manipulate you into thinking that they've gained respect for you when you pander, because they are glad that you're not holding them accountable for the obvious. That's really interesting. Thank you for giving me something to think about. Really common thing that non-vegans say to us. That's pandering. They pander to us as well. But this is also as a result of your pandering usually, if you're pandering to them. Don't let them get away with this. When they say, I really respect your message, I really respect the work you do. Thank you for the work you do. With all due respect, we're not standing out here for your respect. We're here out of respect for the victims, your victims. Speak boldly. when you place yourself in the victim's position, isn't that how you would like to be represented? Wouldn't you like people to speak clearly and directly on your behalf? Whenever you are afraid to speak up for the animals directly, or if non-vegans call you too extreme, just put yourself in the victim's position and analyze your approach from their perspective. Would you consider a respectful yet direct conversation too extreme if you were the one locked up in a slaughterhouse right now, about to be killed? Speaking boldly is the most effective approach. When you don't speak boldly, it's implied that veganism doesn't need to be taken very seriously. You have to leave people feeling motivated. They need to feel like there is no other option for them other than going vegan. So how to respond to health questions? Only entertain these arguments when the bystander brings them up and when you can sense that they're being genuine in their concern. So if they bring up any health concerns, you can simply say that the science is on our side when it comes to plant-based diets being healthy, and there are plenty of vegan athletes and bodybuilders out there. Any further than that, if they need anything else, okay, ChatGPT, you have a smartphone? Or I can direct you to, even when we hand them a card, on our website, you can find information. There's information that will lead you to figuring this out. That should be enough to convince anyone who's actually genuinely concerned about this. Again, we also have no reason to lie to people. We're not benefiting from them going vegan. Statistics and factoids, keep them minimal outside of what is asked of you. State minimal information during outreach conversations. We are not on the streets to verbally leaflet. I was working with Sophia today a little bit on her outreach video that she wanted to post. And there was one section where Sophia said something about the male calves that are killed for their flesh, and was describing the dairy industry to a guy. And I said to Sophia that part about the baby boys being killed was unnecessary to mention. It's important information to tell to people if they themselves are asking you about it. But unless they're asking you about it, keep the information minimal, because you're either respecting animals or not. You're either exploiting them or not. Get to the point. Get them to understand that whatever is happening to cows, you would not wish to happen to you, and just move on. If they ask any questions, or if they're watching this, and by the way, the screens actually give them enough information, but if they want to know more about what they're watching, why is the baby being taken away from the mother? Then explain it. By all means, explain it. But keep it as short and as to the point as possible. You aren't at a Cube of Truth to be a statistician. You're there to have a concise conversation that holds people to account for their oppression of animals. If they want to go back and forth with debates about statistics, that is going to be a waste of time, most likely, especially when it comes to environmental talking points and health talking points. You will actually, a lot of the times, get stuck in this back and forth debate about statistics and science. And it just ends up going nowhere usually. When it comes to which injustices to compare to in order to get the point across, a lot of the times people will compare to dogs, or compare to racism or sexism or any of the other injustices. The most effective comparison we have found is to put the person that you're speaking with in the victim's position. Why? Because how can they truly understand the severity and the urgency of the injustice unless they imagine themselves being in that situation? That's how we would assess any injustice. So why would we make an exception with this? Please, for the love of sweet baby Jesus, stop using dog comparisons. Why do we think that it's effective? Okay, I take that back. It can be effective. But I hope that you also share my goal, which is to be the most effective you can be. If that's what your goal is, then stop using dog comparisons. Why? Because dogs and cats are some of the most exploited animals on the planet. Why are you comparing to dogs? It doesn't make any sense to me the more that I think about this and the more that I do this work. If you're trying to earn the same amount of respect for dogs with cows, so if you're saying, well, what if this was a dog when you're pointing at a cow on the screen? If you're going to get to that level with people, those people that you're talking to probably have a dog in their homes that they just got from a breeder. Right? So is that what you really want to achieve? You are not achieving animal liberation by doing this. And again, I know that it can be effective in some cases, especially to spark the conversation initially. But I think, in my view, it actually builds a poor foundation, even from the beginning. So I know it can work with low-hanging fruit or with some people who wouldn't otherwise talk to you, but it's usually based on a sense of disgust if you're doing the dog meat thing. Oh, yuck, I just ate Labrador. But is this about being yuckiness? Is that really the foundation? This is about injustice. It doesn't sit well with me that this is the approach that so many vegans use. We still have breeders, we still have shelters that kill dogs, I live in Asia. My God, how much exploitation you see with regards to dogs is sickening. It's truly sickening. So it just blows my mind that you think that we live in a society of actual dog lovers. Yes, of course, most humans find dogs they have more affection, let's say, to dogs. Yeah? They want to keep dogs around more than they do cows and pigs and chickens. But that doesn't mean they actually have the true level of respect that we're aiming for. True respect means to not exploit. At the very least, that's what it means, to not exploit others. With regards to the dog comparison, this is also about not leading with compassion. It's not about the love that people feel towards animals. It's about the hate that they feel towards the injustice that they are responsible for. It doesn't come down to whether you can imagine your dog in a slaughterhouse. It comes down to whether you can imagine yourself in a slaughterhouse. Victim's position is the most effective way to address this, not from a dog's perspective. Let's go through some unacceptable terms. Meat eater. Why? Because you're only addressing people who are vegetarians. If you just say meat eaters, then vegetarians are off the hook. Your vegan journey. What if we were to replace vegan with child abuse-free journey? That makes the point. Omnivore also is a word that is unacceptable because omnivore suggests that biology is somehow important in this conversation, like there's some kind of biological requirement that people have for eating animals, and that's not only not true, but who cares? I don't care if we're carnivore, herbivore, or omnivore. We can be vegan. More importantly, we should be. Carnivore is also not, you see a lot of these debates, vegan versus carnivore. Is that the equivalent, opposite to vegan, carnivore? Because veganism is a stance against animal exploitation. Carnivores are just people who are eating animals, and they're usually only eating flesh. And again, it's not a diet. We're not just like carnivores. That doesn't actually address all of the other forms of exploitation, like wearing animal skins or going to zoos and aquariums and buying products that are tested on animals, dog breeders. So we find that to be an unacceptable term. Plant-based, we've already covered that. Carnism is a word that we don't find to be acceptable because the definition, the way that it was actually defined, only refers to diet. And the word carnism, the root word of carnism is carne in Latin, which actually means meat. And so we're talking about meatism essentially. And again, that goes back to meat eater being a problem. Also, another unacceptable term is it when referring to animals. And I think you all know this, but we just want to make it clear. It's and things are inappropriate ways to address individuals' language. So let's just talk a little bit about your body language during outreach. You should interact with the public like a normal human being. What we mean by that is don't be a robot. Don't get too psyched out in your head about things. A lot of the times when people are approaching on outreach, I see them being really meek. Like, hello. Or trying to trick people into a conversation by sneaking up from behind them. And be like, hello, and that's usually what happens. So that's what we mean by be a normal human being. When you approach someone, just say hello, make eye contact, and start the conversation. Tailor your language and tone to suit the individual. So this means be mindful of who you have in front of you. So if you're talking to someone who's a truck driver, don't talk to them in a corporate way. Don't talk to them like you would talk to someone who's wearing a suit and tie. It doesn't make any sense. They're not going to understand. It's not going to resonate. These are some of the things that you will need to adjust to their personality type. Like if they're shy or if they're really talkative, then work with that accordingly. If there's a language barrier, you will also need to simplify your language and make sure you don't use really long, big words because that's not going to land. And if there's an age consideration, then as you can see in that photo with Asal, she's like leaning down at eye level, having a conversation with the child. I really love that. And in terms of whether we should actually talk to kids or not, yes, we should. Absolutely. There should be absolutely no hesitation to talk to children. Should they see the footage? Yes, absolutely. I've never seen a child crying at a cube of truth as a result of seeing the footage. I know that it's happened. I've heard some people telling me. I've never seen it though. I'm yet to see it. My point being is that people say, oh, kids can't handle the truth. No, I think adults can't handle the truth. And they're the ones who usually usher the kids away. The kids are usually open to learning at cubes, and it's usually the parents go, come on, and they pull them away. So it's the parents that are the problem here. It's not the kids. They're crying because of the injustice perpetuated by non-vegans. And I would argue that if you are hesitant to show people who are of a younger age the truth, then what you're overlooking is the injustice that's forced down their throats every day. It's actually more abusive by far for them to be subjected to that injustice, to have their souls tarnished by this injustice, by their caretakers, by their parents. Are you going to let that happen? Because that's what is on the other side of you not showing kids the truth. Body language. Be mindful of the bystander's body language. Are they engaged? Are they open? Are they relaxed? Are they invited? Are they closed? Not interested? Uncomfortable? Not engaged? Be mindful of these things and work with those things. The arm positioning, posture, hand movements, eye contact. So when you're talking to people, try not to be overly stimulating with your hands flailing around like this all the time. With your eye contact, make sure you're making eye contact during the conversation. If you're looking around, it shows you're not really present. You're not actually interested. You're not really invested in the conversation. Your arm positioning. So I usually like to have this stance. Like that's kind of just generally what I do because it shows that I'm open. But if you're standing like this, that's fine too. Don't get too in your head about this. But you definitely don't want to be like, there's some people that also get really awkward and they stand like this while they're talking. Like just be mindful of the way that you are standing because you're standing for the animals. Have a strong posture. Have a strong presence as best as you can. You may already say this in your outreach. You may say you are supporting this. You are contributing to this. Instead, it is far more accurate to say you are responsible for this or this is happening because of you. In our view, this is just distasteful. Since when did it become about vegans being sexier? It's about bringing justice to the animals. Vegans are sexier doesn't give you a moral obligation. When vegan activists aren't respecting the animals, how can we expect non-vegans to respect them? How are they going to take our work seriously when we're saying we only fuck vegans? Your sexual preferences should only be shared with others in a private setting usually. Or if you are going to say I only fuck vegans, it should be contextual. Not when you're doing vegan activism where people are clearly looking at you. They know that your goal out there is to create vegans. They know that you want them to be vegan. That's why you're standing out there doing this work. In that context, it makes no sense to be telling people your sexual preference. It has no business being there in that conversation. Eat my pussy, not animals. Again, that's like a dietary message first and foremost. But also, like, you're inviting people to eat your... I don't understand. Like, vegans last longer. I mean, most vegans I know eat junk food, vegan junk food. So is it just because we took a justice position that we last longer? Most vegans are not actually healthier necessarily because they eat junk food. So is it about the fact that we took a justice position that makes us last longer? I don't understand this. You know, would we say if you are against child abuse, you will last longer in bed? If you're anti-racist, you will last longer. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. So again, I think that it would make sense if this said plant-based, right? Because then it would be like a health message. I would understand that, right? There's more blood flow through the arteries, etc. But when it says 9 reasons why vegans have better sex, that should say plant-based dieters. Then I would understand that article or whatever that's from. Our core principle number 1 is holding not only non-vegans, but vegans accountable, both of them. But most of the people we are talking to are not vegan. So remember that that is your goal. You are not there to just give people information and to make them aware about this. That's actually incredibly weak as a goal. Ample information in society already exists on the subjugation of animals, and it is widely recognized that non-vegans exploit other animals to death. They just choose to look away from this. They choose to ignore. What is lacking in society is accountability. Our task is to confront people with the contradiction between claiming that other animals deserve our respect and acting in ways that undermine that ethical principle. Nobody in society is ever going to hold non-vegans accountable. Ever. You will be the only person that they come across in their entire lives. 99% chance that that's the case. So why would you spoil that opportunity to just give them information for them to consider? Core principle number 2, victim's perspective. We place ourselves in the victim's position in order to acutely grasp the realities of any injustice. This not only fosters empathy, but also highlights the urgency of taking action against it. It's fundamentally critical to do this in the case of the animal holocaust. People most effectively comprehend the consequences of their non-vegan life when they imagine themselves in the victim's position. Core principle number 3 is a call to action. It is not enough for people to simply agree with the principle of veganism, and surprise, surprise, how could you not? Most people do agree already. Only through decisive action will they understand that merely thinking about veganism or trying it is insufficient. It's completely unacceptable. They need to make a firm choice to respect other animals as individuals and act accordingly. If they were the one being heinously exploited, they would also need this principle to be enacted on their behalf. And now let's talk about what you can control, because again, like a lot of people ask us how we know we're effective. Do we measure our results? Do we have stats to represent our success? And we actually do. We actually do have a lot of stats that we can present. But we find it to be inaccurate to say that that is the reason why we're successful. We know that we can only control certain things when it comes to this. Anything short of us actually following people in their lives privately, with private investigators involved, anything short of that is pretty inaccurate, right? Even if we get their email addresses, even if we get their phone numbers and we check up with them and say, are you vegan now? Yes, I am. People have every reason to lie to us. Why would we necessarily think that that's true? So the 4 things that we can control are what we say, how we say it, who we say it to, and how long we say it. So let's cover them. Number 1 is what you say. Stick to tried and true principles. Avoid distractions and control the conversation. Avoiding distractions is incredibly important. So when someone brings up, oh, but what about abortion? What's your position on abortion? When that happens, your response should be, I'm not here to talk about abortion, and pivot back to the animals. Stay focused, justice for the animals. That's what we're there for. Don't get dragged into side topics. Distractions are endless. What about plants? They also have feelings, don't they? Guide the conversation, don't let others guide it. How you say it, this is important. Be assertive, don't be afraid to be bold. This is what we talked about before. Honesty. Make sure that the way you're talking is just pure honesty. Appropriately represent the victims. Speak clearly and truthfully. Don't sugarcoat reality. It's the largest and most atrocious injustice on earth. And the victims need your voice. Be respectfully firm. And always speak in the same way that you would want to be spoken for if you were in the victim's position. Who you say it to, focus on the reachable people. This is again back to what I was saying. You need to assess who you're talking to. Focus on those who are open to listening. Not every outreach interaction is worth your energy. After addressing 3 objections, if they aren't listening or don't seem to care about how sound your rebuttals are, you're most likely wasting your time. There are plenty of people who are willing to act. Spend your time with them. So if they give you an excuse and you address it successfully, but they don't care about your response, they've barely even acknowledged your response, then they move on to the second thing and you address that successfully. The same thing occurs. They bring up a third excuse. You address that successfully. What makes you think that addressing any more is going to go anywhere productive? You're wasting your time most likely. 3 strikes, you're out, just like baseball, okay? So if you give them 3 successful responses and they're still not listening, move on. This is going nowhere, and walk away. Some people ask me, how do you end the conversation? You don't have to come up with anything witty. Actually, the most effective thing to do in that situation is just to walk away. That's the whole point, is walking away. And I promise you, the best statement that you can make to people who are not listening, the ones who are making excuses in the face of this injustice, is to walk away. Why? Because it lets them know deep down that at least one vegan in their lives was not willing to put up with their bullshit. That's a powerful message on behalf of the animals. And the reason why I know that's true is because a lot of the times people will chase you. Wait, come back. Where are you going? They want to have the last say. They might even come up to someone else at the cube. They might approach some other outreacher. Wait, that person just walked away from me. Can we continue? This is why I say you're not at a cube as an individual. You're there as a team player. If that happens, I'm sure that my colleague walked away from you for a good reason. Goodbye. Walk away. There's power in unity and consistency. When we're on the same page, it's a strong message on behalf of the animals. You need to make yourself available for people who are reachable. So make sure you make that happen sooner rather than later. Be available to talk to someone who is reachable. The more you're stuck in this web with this person, the less you are going to be available to speak to someone else. Last thing is how long you say it, because like I said before, keeping it short and to the point is extremely important. Disengage with trolls quickly. Don't waste your time. This isn't complicated. Don't get stuck with trolls. Your time matters. Veganism isn't complicated. It's about justice. Over-explaining implies that the issue is complicated. Do you respect animals? Then act like it. Say what needs to be said and move on if the conversation goes nowhere. You have a limited amount of time and power on this planet, and you are the only one who's in control of that, of how you spend your time and the power that you have. Non-vegans have every reason to take your power away from you, whether they're doing it consciously or not, right? So it's easier, like I said before, to play the victim and to attack you, the messenger, and to try and disempower you, right? They'll say, you're too extreme, actually, let me give you some advice. If you had a different approach, I might have listened. They do all these little gaslighting tricks in order to disempower you. Be mindful of that's what's happening when that's happening. Be mindful of that, because they don't care about you continuing your activism and getting more and more powerful and more successful. They actually want to work against that, because it's easier to play the victim and to attack the messenger than it is to just be accountable. But, transparency on this, it happens. You're human. If you're not angry and frustrated and you don't lose your shit sometimes, then you're not human. And if you're not angry and frustrated, then you're not paying attention to how severe the injustice is for the victims. So it will happen sometimes, but do your best to not give your power away to people, because that is what is most important, that you maintain your power and you keep fueling it so that you can get better and better over time. And this is what it's all about, not giving it away to people in those moments where they just want to work against you. We're going to now get into the flowchart, okay? When I cover the flowchart, remember that this is not a script. Every step in the flowchart is based on principles, and I'll cover the principles as well so that you understand why we have curated the questions and the points in the way that we have. Use your best judgment and common sense on how to maneuver through the steps. So in my Irish interactions that I recorded, when you watch them, you'll actually see me maneuvering through these steps sometimes. Sometimes I'll actually skip a step and I'll go to another, but I always come back. I never actually skip any step at the end of the conversation. I've covered everything, more likely than not. Read the room, pay attention to nuances, and do not sound like a robot. Now, this is a learned skill. I can't teach you this in a workshop. I can't teach you how to read the room. But this is something you have to develop over time through practice. As long as you are committed to learning this, you will. There are different ways of saying the same points. For example, do you know what the biggest advantage is on step 6? We actually have now updated this to exactly that, because we now feel that advantage is actually a stronger word than the word benefit, because this is not about human benefits. If already expressing emotions verbally, don't ask how do you feel about humans exploiting other animals. So when you walk over to someone and say hi, and they're watching the footage and they're either crying, or they clearly look sad, or they clearly look angry at what they're watching, you don't need to ask how do you feel. You can actually now make a statement. Hi, I can see that you're feeling upset about humans exploiting other animals. That would be the most appropriate way of saying it in that case, which is exactly why I'm saying this is not a script. So this is step number 1 in the flowchart. Again, make eye contact. Hello. Yeah, you have to say hello. That's how you break the ice in any conversation. Hello. How do you feel about humans exploiting other animals? Feel is in red for a reason. The reason is that feel is more important than think, because most people, in the way that they think, are conditioned. Their brains are usually programmed by society, right? How you feel about this is usually more in line with the truth, because the heart is pure. And when we tell people the truth, it hits you in the chest, doesn't it? It doesn't hit you in the head as much. Like I said before, overly intellectualizing this is not the way forward. This truth needs to get under your skin. That's how people change. So how do you feel about humans exploiting other animals? And most people will say, this bothers me, it's bad, it's not, something along those lines. Now, the principle behind this question is to qualify and explain. We need to qualify who we're talking to so that we can minimize the risk of us wasting our time. Begin by assessing their mindset about animal exploitation. Determine if they are open to honest reflection, or if they're defensive about the ethical inconsistency of their views and choices. So if they need an explanation because they're confused about what they're watching, you can say, we are showing the most common forms of exploitation. Other animals being exploited for their flesh, breast milk, eggs, skins, etc. Do you agree that humans should respect other animals? This is the second question. We need to establish their position. That's the purpose of this. Set a foundation of mutual understanding and gain a clear stance on their values about respecting animals. This way, you can repeatedly bring the conversation back to their stated beliefs, pointing out conflicts between their words and actions. This is why we do it. We can call them out on this later when they say, well, it just tastes good. But you already said that we should be respecting other animals. Eating animals is not respectful. Surely you can agree with that. Can you truly respect animals if you exploit them for their flesh, milk, eggs, skin, or any other purpose? This is about getting them to acknowledge the contradiction, and we're doing that early in the conversation. Do you notice how we're only 3 steps in, and yet we've already delivered so much truth? Because that's what we need to do. We need to get straight to the point. Expose the hypocrisy in claiming to respect animals while being responsible for their exploitation. The strength of this principle lies in making this contradiction unmistakably clear, forcing them to confront the gap between their views and their actions. Do you feel that this would be acceptable as an excuse to justify exploiting you? If they give you an excuse, that would be a really good response. All right, step number 4. Do you know what the original definition of veganism is? Why did we put the word original in there? Because we found that when we ask the question, do you know what the definition of veganism is? They go, yeah, I know what it is. And they might still say that in this question, but it minimizes the chance of that happening. It happens less likely now. And if they say, yeah, I know what it is, and you say, okay, can you please explain it to me? They'll say something along the lines of, it means you don't eat meat. and you don't eat dairy and eggs and things like that. So they think it's a diet, and they actually think it's a restrictive diet. That's a problem, a massive problem, because it's not about that at all. So this is also a good opportunity to teach them something, and it sounds like a point of inquiry. So if someone's on the receiving end hearing this question, do you know what the original definition of veganism is? If I was not vegan and I heard someone asking me that question, I would be more interested to know the answer than if someone said, do you know what veganism is? So now what you're doing is setting the foundation. Define veganism as an ethical principle, rejecting animal exploitation. It's not just a dietary identity or lifestyle choice. Educate them on the true meaning to prevent and dismantle misconceptions. It's the ethical principle that humans should live without exploiting other animals. It's not a diet, lifestyle, or identity. It addresses the supremacist mindset that other animals exist for us to use. Just so we're on the same page, exploitation means using someone for your selfish purposes. That's a beautiful thing to say, that whole paragraph. But again, this is not a script. Find a good way to say this. The way I lately have been saying this is, it was defined in 1951 as the ethical principle that humans should not exploit other animals. That means that you stop viewing other animals as existing for your selfish purposes, and instead you acknowledge that they exist for their own reasons. Do you agree? Do you agree that they don't exist as your property? That they don't belong to you? And usually they'll say yes. That's how I explain it. I find this to work really well because I've explained that last line in the sentence, in the paragraph there, just so we're on the same page. Exploitation means using someone for your selfish purposes. The reason why we need to explain that is because a lot of people don't seem to understand what exploitation even means, especially in different countries or people from other countries where there's a bit of a language barrier. So even if they speak fluent English, explain exploitation. And the way that I just explained it involved that exploitation explanation in it. All right, step number 5. So do you know what the biggest advantage of living vegan is? Now, this question is about determining their character, revealing their hypocrisy, and evaluating their willingness to align their actions with their real ethical values. This step shows whether they have the integrity to accept responsibility and make a change, or if they are simply seeking rationalizations to continue exploiting animals. Who are you? That's what I want to know when I'm doing outreach to someone. Who are you? What is your character? Because that will determine whether you will go vegan or not. For them, you'll no longer be the reason that they're exploited. This is how you would explain the answer. When they say, oh, the biggest advantage, by the way, most people will say, well, it's better for your health. It's better for the environment, which proves that we don't even need to be talking about this kind of shit to people. They already get it. Of course, fruits and vegetables are healthier for you. Of course, it's better for the environment when you look at the number of animals that are being exploited to death. 3 trillion animals every year at the hands of 8 billion humans. Of course, it's going to cause an environmental problem. But I knew this before I even became vegan. I knew about the environmental point. It made all the sense in the world to me. Oh, if we ate fruits and vegetables directly, that would be better for the environment. I was like, yeah, of course. I didn't even need to look at the science. It's just a no-brainer. So you'll notice when you ask that question, do you know what the biggest advantage is? That people will actually say that. They'll say health or environment. But if they say something along the lines of, oh, well, it's better for the animals, that means they're getting it. That's a good sign. It's a green flag. And so the way you should always explain it in all of those cases is, I'll explain it like this. For them, you'll no longer be the reason that they're exploited or disrespected, or both. You could say both. For you, when you say that you're against animal exploitation, or that you, earlier you said you respect animals, you'll no longer be a hypocrite. Once you say that part, and the hypocrite point should be on the end of that, just pause. Let it sit for a moment. Let it resonate. Because that's potentially the strongest thing that you've pointed out in the whole interaction. And by the way, for those of you who may be hesitant to say this because you don't want to call people hypocrites, just know that you are actually cheating people out of this transformation, of this shift. Because some of the strongest vegan activists we have on the planet were called out for their hypocrisy. Gary Yourofsky is one of them. On my YouTube channel, there's a story that I recorded in the back of Gary's car in Detroit in 2018, where he told the story about a story that had never been heard before, about him getting on a radio station, and he was being an animal rights activist, but he wasn't even vegan at the time. And he was protesting against a Detroit hockey team throwing octopuses onto the ice whenever someone scored a goal. And right, that was the tradition. Dead octopuses would be thrown onto the ice. So he got onto the local radio station and he started calling out everybody and saying how absurd it was and saying that this tradition needs to stop. And then the radio host said to him, Gary, calm down. What did you have for dinner last night? And he said for the first time, he actually lied, because he says he's usually very honest, and in that instance, he lied and he said, a salad. And then he hung up the phone and then he said, that was the shortest lived lie in my life. From now on, I'm going to be vegan. Again, if you don't call people out on the hypocrisy, and if you use words that are softer, like contradiction, if you use words that don't actually highlight, if you try to say the word hypocrite in another way, and you, in other words, only just merely suggest that maybe they're a hypocrite, you're not actually going to get there as fast as you need to. You're cheating people out of not only becoming vegan, but potentially being the best vegan activist that we have in this movement. All right, step number 6. Do you feel that there's anything preventing you from living vegan now? Address objections. This is the point of this, to address objections. Encourage them to share any barriers that they may feel about going vegan, allowing space for them to voice insecurities or misconceptions. Then focus on challenging the validity of the excuse itself, keeping the conversation on track and removing any attempt to deflect from accountability. Identify all of the objections. So once you address the health thing, if they bring it up, or the plants thing, once they bring it up, then you can say, do you feel that there is anything else preventing you? Test open-mindedness. So I did this during the VCO talk. I asked if this objection, and in her case it was nutrition, was not an issue for you, would you go vegan today? And what did she say? More excuses. She didn't even answer the question, actually. So that showed that that was a test. I was testing her open-mindedness to see if it was even worthwhile going into the nutritional thing. If she said, yes, absolutely, I've just been searching for months now to figure out how to get enough protein, then I would be like, okay, great, I've got you covered. And I'll talk to you after this talk and we'll figure it out. But can I get a commitment from you from right now? If I show you how to get your protein in a plant-based diet, will you actually be vegan from now? And she should have said yes if that was a genuine concern. All right, so step number 7. If you were in the victim's position, how fast would you need this injustice to end? So the purpose of this is the victim's position and the urgency. This is what we're highlighting. It helps them to empathize and understand the severity and the urgency of this issue. By imagining the situation from the victim's perspective, almost any argument or objection can be dealt with sufficiently by asking if the given argument or objection would be acceptable if they were the victim. The workshops I used to do back in 2017, 2018, like these earlier workshops that I used to do, a lot of people used to ask questions on, how do you deal with God though? How do you deal with plants though? And how do you deal with circle of life though? And I found myself going, yeah, this is the best way to do it. Okay, yeah, you say this, you say this, you say... But it's not about having the most perfect counter-argument. It's about putting them in the victim's position. That's usually the best way to deal with it. God, though. Well, what if it was my faith and my belief that it's okay to own you as my property? Would you accept that? Can I just do whatever I want with you because that's what my belief tells me to do? And if they're open-minded, that should be enough. Step number 8. From now on, how many more animals should be exploited because of you? 0 or more? And you realize that all of these words that we've highlighted in red are there for a significant reason. Should is part of the definition of veganism. It's in there. Humans should live without exploiting other animals. And that word should is touching on the injustice. right? When there's a should involved, that means that you are describing something that has a good and a bad element to it. And in this case, how many more animals should be exploited because of you? 0 or more? Most people will say 0 because, again, you're highlighting how absurd, how wrong it is for them to be picking any number that's higher than 0. So the purpose of this step is to offer the solution, show them that veganism is the only way to align their actions with their ethical values. Eliminating any lingering complicity, veganism allows them to live authentically in a way that reflects the respect that they claim to have for other animals. Step number 9. So, vegan from now? This is about getting a declaration, because it's not enough to just simply go through all of these steps without this. At the end, if you do not get a declaration, you have not actually completed your job. The least they could do is give you a clear declaration that they're going to stop being the reason that animals are disrespected to death from now on. Urge them to make a definitive commitment to stop viewing animals as means to human ends, challenge them on embracing veganism, and ask them to defend animals by also speaking out against this injustice. Starting now, this is not just food for thought, it's a call to action. There is no acceptable reason for you to not be vegan as of right now. For as long as you are not vegan, this will be happening because of you. The next step is to speak out. Use your voice to defend animals against human supremacism, just as you would want to be defended if you were in their position. You can see a common thread in everything I'm saying, right? The 3 principles keep coming up: holding them accountable, putting them in the victim's position, and a call to action. The reason why I'm repeating these things is because I want it to be hammered into your brains. It is also just that simple. And the last step, do you agree that we should actively defend animals? Like I'm doing. This is a call to action because, again, we're not just there to create vegans. We're there to create vegan activists. AV is about creating vegan activists who are the most effective at creating vegan activists. Passive vegans do not push the vegan movement forward. Vegans are the only ones that animals have to rely on. Raise your hand if you ever believed that living by example was enough. Yeah. And I'm glad that you have evolved. You're sitting here today because I'm sure that you no longer align with that belief. And I'm glad, because that is incredibly absurd. Veganism without activism is passive consumerism, nothing more. And when you go and choose vegan products, sure, that helps the vegan industry, but we're talking about, well, it helps the plant-based industry, right? Veganism is a justice stance. The definition actually says humans should live without exploiting other animals, which means when you reject animal exploitation, you actually need to speak up about it. You need to fight for the rejection. You need to fight for other humans not doing this, especially when this is the biggest injustice in the world. We have absolutely no right to be saying, well, I only eat plant-based food, so I'm already active as a vegan. That's not only absurd, it's quite frankly insane. And I don't understand why so many vegans think like this. Just do us all a favor and revoke your vegan card and say you're plant-based. Because at the end of the day, it would make more sense. If you are vegan and you're doing it for the animals, if you agree with that definition of veganism, and it's not about fetishizing over the definition, it's about understanding what this is all about. If you understand that this is about rejecting animal exploitation, ending human supremacy, then how can you see it as anything other than a justice movement? How can you be vegan if you're not moving with the movement? And at the very least, speaking up about this in your social circles. Silent vegans and passive vegans do not push this movement forward. If anything, they hold the movement back. Because it implies when you're silent and passive to other non-vegans that this doesn't need to be taken seriously, that it is merely a personal choice that has no consequences really. So do you agree that animals deserve to be defended? Most people will say yes to this because at this point in the conversation, they've stood there listening to everything you have to say. Most likely they will agree with this because, you're getting through to them to some degree. Please do not be a passive vegan. Speak up for them in the same way that you would want to be spoken up for if you were in their position. Once you get them to commit to being vegan, at this point, what you would also do, and this is something that we've been taking very seriously now, my favorite upgrade, my favorite update to our protocol in AV as a result of the campaigns we just did that I explained earlier in Cologne and Amsterdam, is that we actually make a concerted effort to ask them to join us right now. This is something we have done in the past, but now we make sure we never skip this part in all of the outreach interactions. And the result, we had at least 10 people every single day that we operated jumping in the cube for the first time. At least 10 people every day. There were days where we had over 20. So do not think that you are asking too much of people to join us right now. The worst that they'll say is no. And what you're doing is offering them an opportunity to join the most effective vegan outreach organization on the planet. You're giving them a platform. You're also showing them that this is about fighting. This is not just about you going off and choosing plant-based products in the grocery store. It's about now using your voice, and you can actually join a team that's already effective at doing that so that you can be empowered as a vegan activist. What I would say, what you should say at the end is, if you've got 5 minutes right now, you can stand inside of this art installation, you can hold a screen, and you can stand for the animals with us right now. Would you like to do that? All right, so this is how you would talk to vegans. Oh, I'm vegan. Oh, really? Okay. Do you know what the original definition of veganism is? Okay, and if they say something other than this, then explain it to them. Veganism was defined in 1951 as the ethical principle that humans should live without exploiting other animals. It means that you reject animal exploitation. It's not just a diet. It's not an identity. It's not a lifestyle choice. It means that you stop viewing other animals as existing for your purposes and acknowledge that they exist for their own reasons. So here, you are educating them on the true meaning to prevent and dismantle misconceptions. It is shocking how many people identify as vegan and don't know the definition. It is completely absurd that so many people are walking around saying they're vegan and do not even understand the original definition. Make sure you make this extremely clear and you make an effort to get them to understand this and to align with this, to agree with this. So you're also pointing out that this is not about the environment, it's not about health, it's only about justice for the animals, and that the animals deserve a movement dedicated to them. Step number 2, do you feel that it's acceptable for others to disrespect animals? Do you feel it is acceptable if others disrespect animals? In other words, is it okay to not be vegan? Do you think it's okay to not be vegan? But I think that this is a stronger way of saying it. Do you feel it is acceptable for others to disrespect animals? Justice isn't optional. Make them understand that the most victimized need to be defended too. Help them empathize and understand the severity and the urgency of this issue by imagining the situation from the victim's perspective. Almost any argument and objection can be dealt with sufficiently by asking them if the given argument or objection would be acceptable if they were the victim. You're doing the same principles here that you would do with non-vegans. Step number 3, do you agree that we should be actively defending animals? This is the moral obligation. Vegan activism is a moral obligation. Living by example does not push the vegan movement forward. Active vegans are the only ones that the animals have to rely on. Vegan, passive, not responsible for animal exploitation. Vegan activist, active, speaking up for the victims and holding non-vegans accountable. Step number 4, if you were in their position, how fast would you need people to defend you? Highlight the urgency, express the urgency of the injustice and the need to speak up. We're talking about the largest and most atrocious injustice on earth. And the victims need your voice now. Step 5, are you able to join us right now? Call to action. If they say yes, send them to an organizer for a briefing. An organizer will be the one who can get them a mask, and then when they're walking them to the cube to get them into the cube, they'll actually brief them on cube protocol, how to stand, raising your hand when you need to come out, all the other things that we need to cover. So make sure you get them an organizer as soon as possible. If not now, if they say, I've got to run and you feel like it's genuine, then let them go and say, well, if not now, then can I get a commitment on you speaking up for the animals? If you're not already doing that, yeah? So give them the information on our card. tell them how they can join the organization. They can either find a local chapter or they can become an organizer with the information on the card. What I like to say is that the information on this card will empower you to be the best vegan activist you can be. And then I give them the card and I would tell them about finding their local chapters and stuff. The least that you can do is refuse to stay silent about it. If you need support, go to activism101.com, but it's on the card now. You don't even need to give them that. But Activism 101 has a bunch of tools that are put together for vegans to be active and to be the best activists they can be. But that information is now on cubeoftruth.com. There's a link to it. That's the end of the slides.
Is it more effective when somebody gets offended if they are called an abuser or a murderer?
I'm for calling them out for being animal abusers and animal murderers.
Okay, yeah.
But I also want to say this. Focus on exploitation as the core issue. Otherwise, if you focus on the killing or abuse kind of suggests that there's a right way to use.
Yeah.
So if you focus on those words too much, be careful, because the overall context matters, and I think the overall message should be focused on exploitation, because that's what the definition is about after all anyway. It's going to cover all of the injustices that fall under that when you address it that way.
So when I was in Vegan Camp and you were speaking about the old definition, my first thought it was, I'm not sure if you agree with the new definition or the latest definition. So if someone say, oh, something is wrong with the definition right now, what would you say? Or are you agree with the definition, with the current definition or no?
What do you mean by current definition?
So, yeah, the definition of veganism by the Vegan Society.
The one with, the Vegan Society definition. I don't know the full story of why they changed it. Ben has some theory on this. Would you like to share it with everybody? Come, yeah, please.
So, from my perspective, like the Vegan Society essentially had diluted the definition from a principle to a practice by saying it's a way of living. So then it's not necessarily about justice. It's more like a personal preference. And a lot of people kind of seem to focus more on the practicable part of it. When you understand this as a principle, like if you're forced into a situation, you're not necessarily violating a principle. You know, let's say somebody's forcing, a chicken finger down your throat. It's not that you're not vegan anymore, right? So it's essentially like if you're living in a non-vegan society and there's a lot of these things around you that happen to be byproducts of animals like fuel or something like that, like you're not violating a principle because you're being forced into using those, which eliminates the as far as possible and practicable, right? And so then they also added health and environment into the definition in the new Vegan Society definition, which again dilutes the justice. And then they also added, their goal is to seek to add new and innovative products or something like that, I believe, in the definition, which again, like there's companies that can be doing that, but essentially for us as vegans, once you hold that principle, you stop to recognize animals as objects, you start to recognize them as unique individuals, and you don't have the urge to exploit them anymore. Right? So all your actions flow from the principle that you hold, right? And ultimately, just getting people to recognize that they already hold that principle, that they want to be respecting animals, it should be easy for them to actually start living that way. And so it's a lot simpler. It's one line. It's easy to understand. It's easy to remember. Whereas if I asked like all of you guys here to recite the Vegan Society definition, like I guarantee like maybe one or two of you might be able to fully recite it. But keeping it simple just highlights that this is a simple issue.
I mean, I think that for me, as practical and possible is because we still live in a non-vegan world, and there are practices still need animal exploitation, like for example, medicine, or let's say the almonds and avocado thing, isn't it? So that's why I'm still using it, because it's relevant and they can point out to you hypocrisies.
I want to address this misconception in the vegan movement. I have colleagues like Dr. Faraz. For those who don't know Dr. Faraz Hassini, he's a vegan doctor. He's in the medical field and he's a great activist. Now, he's just one of many of the people I've spoken with about this issue in the vegan movement to try and understand how we can boycott the animal testing in the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical products, like drugs that you need to take if you are sick, that do not contain animal ingredients, things that come from animals, but are tested on animals at some point in the process because there's a governing body like the FDA in America. I don't know what you guys have here in the UK. What's that? MHRA, okay. So that's the governing body. They're the ones that are responsible for forcing companies to test on animals in order for their products to be put on the shelves, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have pharmaceutical products available. We wouldn't have drugs available, any. So what I'm trying to say here is that pharmaceutical products are actually very different from cosmetic products. Pharmaceutical products are not going to be boycotted. The testing aspect will not be boycotted based on consumerism. Whether you purchase the product or not has no bearing over whether the animals are tested on or not. When it comes to cosmetics, however, there's options. You have vegan options. So when you boycott companies by choosing the vegan option, in that scenario, you have an effect, you have an impact, you are changing things. So if you want to boycott animal testing in the pharmaceutical world, you actually have to speak up and fight against the governing bodies themselves, not the companies that are selling the products. It doesn't work like that.
I've done sort of bits of activism before, and I've found that pandering is something I've really done. But I'm also worried about being too direct and alienating the person for fear of losing that engagement. And I was wondering if you would have any advice as to how I should approach that in terms of, should I be direct, and if they don't respond to that, I assume they're unreachable and move on? Or is there a middle ground between being direct and being a complete pander to them?
First, address your mindset. Because if you go into these interactions thinking, if I be too direct, it's going to alienate that person, then perhaps you will, right? You manifest destiny. But if you go into the outreach interaction thinking, this person doesn't want to be an oppressor, they don't want to be a victimizer, then you being direct is actually a way for them to upgrade their character. You see what I'm saying?
Okay, so I think of it as me helping them rather than me avoiding alienating them.
Yes, or working against them in some way. You're actually not working against them, you're working in their best interest.
Yeah, okay.
You know, first and foremost, the best interest of the animals, but you're also working in their best interest too, right?
Yeah.
And I would also say that being direct is not losing them. If they have the character to change, you're actually winning them. And also think of it like this. By being direct, the way that it lands with people who are direct is that they are getting the message in the way that it should be delivered. So
It's not sugar-coated, you mean?
yeah, and it's earning respect. Like they need to be given it that way. It's actually just an obligation for you to give it that way. Regardless of how you feel about the truth needs to be delivered. You're just a medium. Right? Think of it like that. Like put yourself aside for a moment and just deliver it. And yeah, and if you feel like they are not open and they're going to walk away because you're too direct or whatever they say to you, no, you're too extreme, you're too direct, then at least they got the direct message from someone. You know, think of it like that. Like they're never going to get it otherwise. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I'm sort of thinking of a scenario where the person walks away because they take an affront to the directness of what I say, and as soon as they walk away, I'll think, oh, if I'd just said it in a softer way. But from what I gather, you're saying that's not the right way to do it, because by saying it in a softer way, you're essentially nullifying the message. You're blunting the message.
Yes, and trust me, I've been down this path many times where I tried to do the softer thing and it blows up usually, and I just feel like a failure. I feel like I've cheated the animals. I feel like I've betrayed them in some way because I have softened the message, which implies that the message doesn't need to be taken so seriously, actually.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. Again, I'm not saying be sharp for the sake of being sharp with people. Be respectful, but be firm with the message, because that's what the animals deserve. That's what you would deserve if you were in their situation. Again, it is that simple. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
Cool. Cheers.
Yeah, how do you respond to people who make endless arguments, appeals to futility in outreach? Because people could make the argument anything you're doing that's for your wants rather than for your needs is harming animals in some way.
Well, that's what whataboutism is. I call people out who are being defeatist. Your attitude is very defeatist. A lot of people who say, well, you're not really changing anything by being... Actually, if you're not vegan, you're responsible for around 1,000 lives, 1,000 animals every year. Every single year, who will be exploited and disrespected in your name. Right? So you choosing to not be vegan is not futile for those animals, for those individuals. Even if it was just one animal from this point on for the rest of your life, that one animal cares about what's going on in that situation. So you can say you don't care because it doesn't mean anything to you, but it does mean a lot to them.
Just wanted to get your take on the efficacy of digital activism, because I've lots of friends who are vegan but are not comfortable doing street outreach. Mm-hmm. So if you know what's effective, what isn't.
So AV from the beginning was all about making sure that what we do on the streets is also married to social media work. At the very first street action we did in, like I said, April 16, 2016 was the first cube. It wasn't called a cube back then, but I recorded my outreach interactions during that. The third cube, I recorded an outreach interaction. That outreach interaction currently has over 5 million views on social media throughout all the platforms. And I wasn't even doing the approach that we have right now. It was somewhat strong, but there's a lot of things I say in that I cringe over. My point being is that social media work is incredibly important. And right now we have more people posting outreach interactions on the AV platform and on their own personal platforms than ever before in this organization. Everybody understands, if you've been with us for a while, they understand that social media work is key. We need to be flooding the internet with outreach interactions and vegan messages. So if people aren't comfortable with getting out onto the streets for whatever reason, yes, they should be making posts on social media and doing whatever they can to get the message out.
I'm just trying to figure out how they get access to these resources, because they're not on the street, they're not getting briefed by chapter leads.
Activism101.com.
I'll shout out Jade for Justice. I gave her the flow chart, and she does these TikTok lives. And she was doing these big debates, and then once I showed her the flow chart, she actually started implementing this, and she's found a lot of success. So she's applying these principles and these questions, and it's helping a lot. Even in the comments section,
And by the way, that's a good example to make. Jade was uncomfortable with getting out onto the streets. She didn't feel like she could actually do this directly with people. Then she joined us in Amsterdam for One Damn Ode for the whole week. And from the beginning, she was like, a fish out of water. And then by the end, she was a monster. I just talked to her today, actually, and she said that she still feels uncomfortable with outreach, but she's looking forward. She's stronger than ever before, and she's looking forward to doing more in future. But she wants to focus on online activism, and that's great. If that's what you end up finding as your strong suit and you want to continue doing that, that's great. But what I think you should also do is street work, because it does mean a lot to have in real life conversations with people. You're able to learn things you wouldn't otherwise learn with online interactions. So I think you should do both.
So my question is, whatever happened to the Liberation Pledge? There was like a website with a yellow. They
it's
used
still
to
happening.
Wear like a fork bracelet.
Yep.
I have actually been practicing that with my own family. So I've been vegan nearly 9 years now, and I've ruined Christmas after Christmas until.
Round of applause.
So, as a result of that, now my whole family have gone vegan.
So a stance rooted in principle is the strongest message. That's what I took away from what you just said, right? Your stance, which was rooted in principle, it was clearly representing justice, right? That was what got the message across. Not a bunch of words, not an hour-long back and forth situation, just him refusing to sit at the table. And that's why walking away from people who aren't reachable has that effect on people, where they're like, whoa, what's going on here? And one thing I didn't cover, actually, now that I remember it, I will. Handshaking. At the end of the interaction, when you say vegan from now, don't offer a handshake and say vegan from now, because what if they shake your hand and they say, I'll think about it? Then you have to cut your hand off. when you get a declaration, so vegan from now, and you sense that it's genuine, can I get a handshake on that? Good, right? Now, if they go to shake your hand and they say, well, thank you for giving me something to think about, you know, we refuse to shake their hand. No fist bumps, no hugs. Why? Because it's disrespectful to the animals, especially after the interaction we just had. We just talked about your responsibility for the biggest atrocity in the world. You want me to shake your hand? Again, victim's position. How would you like this to go right now if you were the victim? So that's a stronger position. And we have actually had people turn around 180 after this. That they go from non-committal to committal as a result of you refusing to shake their hand. Not because of words that you said, but because of an action rooted in justice, rooted in principle. That's why I want to point out how strong that is. And yeah, the Liberation Pledge was something I was doing before it was even called that. I refuse to eat with especially friends or family members at the same table with them if they're exploiting animals in front of me. I'm not going to appropriate that culture. That's exactly what I stand against.
So my question was, what should be done about individuals agree with all the points of the outreach interaction, but not something genuine in their answers? So they basically, they basically make you rush through the flow chart, but they don't sound genuine, so you don't feel like the interaction was worth it.
Mm-hmm. So if they seem to be agreeing with everything and they say yes to going vegan, in this example you're giving?
They basically say yes, but they don't sound...
I actually ask them, are you being honest? Or if they have someone with them who knows them, I'll go, do you believe them? What else can you do? You have to put the needle where it needs to be, and you have to let the universe take care of the rest. But that's the strongest way that you can communicate that, is you're essentially saying you need to be genuine about this. This is not something you can be blasé about.
So I've been doing a lot of outreach in India as well, and you meet a lot of vegetarians there. So what I have tried there is, when they say I'm a vegetarian, I ask them this question. I think it helps. So I ask them, why did you go vegetarian? What was the reason? Then they say it was for the animals. Yep. So I feel like some of the people, they are in their principle, they are on the same side, but in practice they are just uneducated or unaware of what they're doing. So I say, so you are against animal exploitation, and then I talk to them about the dairy industry. So like they have already committed to being against animal exploitation. So it feels like they have this moral obligation to just be on the vegan side. Yeah. I have seen that to be effective. So I think that's the question someone can follow up with.
Yeah, I agree. And we do actually use that as, this is what you're touching on is kind of like communication 101 skills, like checking to see why they're doing what they're doing. Throughout the whole interaction, you should be asking, do you agree with that? Does that make sense? And so that's kind of what I feel you're saying there, is checking in to see why exactly they're vegetarian. So why is that? You're vegetarian. Okay, why is that? And then they will explain further. So you're getting them to elaborate. And then I agree that you can then, that's a foundation that you can then revert back to in the interaction later. You can then go back to the fact that they say that they're against animal exploitation, that they don't want to be the reason that animals are exploited and disrespected. So yes, that's good.
I have a problem that I used to cut people off when they speak the same arguments all over again, or when they talk for ages. So at any point, it's okay to cut off people, or you should listen whatever they say for, 1 or 2 minutes that they want to say something. To me, it's a problem to sometimes when it's too much crap, let's say, I tend to cut them off.
Yeah, if they're just talking at you and not talking with you, if they're going through all of the excuses and you're trying to address them but they're not listening, just walk away.
Okay, but never cut off people.
What do you mean by cut off?
Like they're talking and I say no, or for example, let me give an example. When they say something and I cut them off a little bit, I say someone, for example.
Oh, right.
Correct them maybe, or stuff like that. Do you wait until they finish?
Yeah, genuinely I would, but then I would make a mental note to cover that. So once they've done, I'll give them the response and I'll say, by the way, you also said something. I don't think you actually think animals are things, do you? Surely you can understand that there's someone.
Okay.
If you want to address that, I would say address it at the end. Because what you're asking me is like, again, communication basics. We shouldn't be cutting people off. But also take into consideration that you have to use your best judgment in the conversation. They may be really disgusting and rude with the way that they're talking over you. So if they're doing that, I would cut them off. But generally speaking, it's more respectful in your communication to allow them to finish first.
I
Cool.
did see Paul in one video say, hang on, we're having a discussion and like 2 people are required. So rather than getting them to ramble, just like make sure they understand that, you know, this is a backup.
Yeah, that's right. I was talking and then he started to talk over me and I'm like, hold on a second, dude, I'm not finished. This is a conversation. And then we kept going. So that's, again, controlling the conversation. These are communication skills that you should all be using.